My wife has requested a small box to leave on the coffee table to put things away. She wants dovetails on it. No big deal, fairly simple request, and I want to fulfill that request. But to make things easier for me, first I've made this Moxon Vise, which will help with the dovetailing process. So what is it about a Moxon Vise that is going to be good for dovetailing? Well, the primary thing is, it does everything my regular vise will do, but it's up a lot higher, so I can have more support for the workpiece without having to hunch over it to make those cuts. So this is a much more natural position, better ergonomics, so that I'm not tiring myself out, not wearing my back out, hunching over. Apart from sawing, it's also good for chopping on, because again, everything is raised up, and it just makes it a lot easier to cut those dovetails, much easier to do a better job of them, because I can see what I'm doing because it's nice and close to me. Now, one cool detail is this entire vise is made out of wood, including the vise screws. The reason for that is that eventually I'm going to be selling kits that include 2 nuts and 2 screws with handles, so that you can make your own Moxon Vise. Now, I'm not quite ready to actually sell these yet. 2022 hasn't been the kindest year to the Jenkins family, so I am not in the right state of mind to actually be selling things just yet, but they are coming and I'm actually quite excited about it. For now though, I'm going to build this Moxon Vise so that I can make the box for my wife. The jaws will be made out of 140 by 45 material. Too thin and they may flex in use, so 40mm or more is a good safe bet. The 2 jaws are ripped to find a width. The front jaw ends up being about 5mm wider than the rear jaw. This is deliberate for alignment, but we'll get to that later. The back jaw gets a 1-inch hole drilled through with a Forstner bit for the wood screw. The back jaw is about 100mm longer than the front jaw, so to transfer the hole locations, the 2 jaws are clamped together. Then the drill bit can function as a self-centering awl. The hole in the front jaw actually needs to be an elongated hole to allow for the jaw to tilt slightly and not bind. The 2 holes are drilled and they overlap each other to create the slot. It's then cleaned up with a chisel so that the wood screw can slide back and forth easily. To get the best alignment of the nut, the screw is inserted from the front side and the nut is attached with screws. I didn't realise just how soft these bronze screws are, so I likely won't be using them in the future. Driving a steel screw first would have been a much better idea. The extended workbench is made from random scraps. These are then laminated together to form a workbench top. Random exposed dominoes are really a non-issue here. Dominoes here are purely for alignment during the glue-up. Biscuits, dowels or a full tenon would have all been fine. While the bench top is aligned, it has no support, so some legs are needed. The legs won't go all the way to the front, but they do need to clear the screws. The feet will be dovetailed in, so a slot needs to be cut into the bench top. Please note this is the incorrect way to cut a multiple pass dado at the router table, and I later correct myself. From this angle, you should always start from the leftmost side of the dado. You want to be feeding against the router bit's cutting direction, otherwise it is a climb cut and it can grab the workpiece and fling it away from you. Once the dado is established, a 14-degree dovetail bit finishes the job. Removing the waste with the straight bit first removes extra strain on the dovetail bit. The legs are stood vertically at the router table, and using the same dovetail bit have the shape cut into them. Because of the tight tolerances, always sneak up on your sliding dovetails using multiple passes. Remember, every adjustment of the fence is doubled when both sides of the dovetail are cut. With a good fit, the large leg blank can be cut to height. The last thing is to add some dovetail slots for the match fit clamps and hardware. Microjig make dovetail slot clamps and some runners, or if you have a 3D printer you can make your own hardware. After the relief is cut, their dovetail bit gives a clean result and a slight round over to the slot. Finally, before the glue up, the back jaw needs some shaping. The overhang is cut down so there is just a small section for clamps to hold onto the bench. As I want a nice round transition, I cut the rest of the way with a coping saw. Then add the curve with the spindle sander. Hide glue makes sliding dovetails easy to assemble. While the glue dries on the main assembly, the front jaw can be shaped. This profile is called a LambsTongue and is transferred to the top and front of the jaw. The large chamfer on the front provides some clearance when sawing material. Lots of curves connecting the two lines make it much easier to chip out. the lamb's tongue can be entirely shaped with the chisel. This is a 38mm chisel, which shows how large this lamb's tongue ended up. This would have been much easier if the profile was narrower than the chisel. With the bevel down, a scraping action can help with the contours. Final smoothing is done with a rasp. I still really need to learn better chisel control. I'm gluing crupper, a rubberized cork that's fairly inexpensive, onto the jaw as a liner. Leather or just cork can be used here too. The soft lining provides extra gripping strength. The overhanging crupper can be flushed up with a chisel. I'm using Walrus Oil's furniture finish here because I really wouldn't actually use it on any furniture. My recommendation would be to use tongue as it's cheaper and provides much more protection. Here you can see the overhang on the front jaw helps align the vise to the front of the workbench. At the time of recording, I did not have a dovetail example for this demo. You can see how the vise and its supporting table can hold up the workpieces and clamp them down to transfer the tails to the pinboard. The dovetail tracks can also be used for a fence if you want a reference point for alignment of the boards. The hardware for the fence is just two M6 bolts, two 3D printed thumb screws and two 3D printed dovetail track nuts. This works super well. I have the joinery for the box all cut. It'll be a future episode. The vise works super well. I didn't have to hunch over to get everything cut. I've done a lot of test joints to try and learn how to do dovetails, and my back was quite sore after doing those, so this was a real relief not to have to do that. The dovetail tracks work really well for holding down some MDF as a sacrificial surface so that I'm not chopping into either my workbench or now my Moxon workbench. Just need one or two holdfasts to keep the whole thing secure, and then I can actually store the whole thing under my workbench so it's always ready to go. This was nice and fun to build, and I'm really glad I put the effort into doing the lamb's tongue Need to work on that a little bit more in the future, but it's a nice little detail that makes me quite happy to look at it. Hopefully I'll have some more information soon on the TWK Twirly Whirly Vise kit, but for now, thanks for watching.